There is a specific kind of silence that settles into a house when something is wrong but nobody has said it out loud yet. It is not a peaceful silence. It is the kind that sits on your chest when you are lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the bathroom fan running for the 37th night in a row. Sarah knew that silence well. She had been living inside of it for almost a month. But before we get into today's story, if you are a fan of strange, real, and deeply human stories delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place because that is all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times every week. So if that is of interest to you, go ahead and leave the like button. A voicemail it will never return. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay. Let us get into today's story. Sarah Calloway was 34 years old and lived in a mid-sized town in central Ohio, the kind of place where people stay because the roots grow deep and the cost of living makes leaving feel unnecessary. She worked as a pediatric nurse at the county hospital, the kind of job that requires a very specific type of person, someone patient enough to sit with a frightened 8-year-old and calm enough to not take the chaos of an emergency shift home with her at the end of the day. Sarah was that kind of person. Her co-workers described her as steady. Her patients adored her. She was the nurse who remembered your kid's name 3 months after a single visit and asked about it on your next appointment. That was just who she was. She had been married to Daniel Calloway for 6 years. They had met at a mutual friend's birthday party when Sarah was 27 and Daniel was 30. He had spent most of that party standing near the kitchen, slightly removed from the noise, talking to exactly 2 people the whole night. Sarah had found that endearing. She had always been a little suspicious of people who needed to be in the center of every room, and Daniel was very clearly not that. He was a project manager at a mid-size logistics company, methodical and quiet and reliable in the way that a really good watch is reliable. He was not flashy. He did not make grand declarations. What he did, every single morning without fail, was wake up 20 minutes before Sarah and make a full pot of coffee so that by the time her alarm went off and she came downstairs still half asleep, there was already a hot mug waiting on the counter with exactly the right amount of creamer. He had done this for 6 years. She had never once asked him to. And then there was Maya. Maya Osei had been Sarah's best friend since their sophomore year of college, which meant they had known each other for over 15 years at the point our story begins. They had lived together in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment for 2 years, survived finals and breakups and bad jobs and the specific grief of watching your early 20s slip into your late 20s. Maya had been the maid of honor at Sarah and Daniel's wedding. She had given a speech that made half the room cry, including Daniel, who Sarah had never seen cry before or since. Maya was loud in the best way, generous to a fault, the kind of friend who showed up at your door with food when you were sad without being asked. She and Daniel got along well, the way good spouses and best friends do when everyone genuinely likes each other and nobody is performing anything. They were a unit, the 3 of them. That was just how it was. So when Sarah first noticed the bathroom thing, she did not jump to conclusions. That was not who she was. She was a pediatric nurse. She was trained to observe without overreacting. She noticed things, filed them away, looked for patterns before she said anything out loud. The pattern started on a Tuesday in late September. Daniel had come home from work, they had eaten dinner together, watched about 40 minutes of a show they were working their way through, and then just before 10:30, Daniel had stood up, said he needed to use the bathroom, and taken his phone with him. Sarah had not thought anything of it. People take their phones to the bathroom. That is just life in the 21st century. He came back about 15 minutes later, set his phone face down on the arm of the sofa, and picked up the remote. Normal. Completely normal. The next night, the same thing happened. 10:45. Bathroom. Phone. 20 minutes. Face down on the sofa when he returned. And the night after that. By the end of the second week, Sarah had stopped telling herself it was nothing. She had not started telling herself it was something, either. She was still in that uncomfortable middle space where you notice a thing enough to track it but you have not yet given yourself permission to be worried about it. She was keeping a kind of mental log, the way she did at work when a patient's symptoms were vague but persistent. Not alarming yet. Just worth watching. She started paying closer attention to the details. Not in a dramatic way, not in the way you see in movies where the suspicious spouse is pressing their ear against doors and rifling through coat pockets. It was quieter than that. It was just Sarah, being the observant person she had always been, applying that same steady attention to her own home and her own husband. And what she noticed, when she really started paying attention, was a small collection of things that each meant nothing on their own but together made a shape she did not entirely like. The first thing she noticed was the phone itself. Daniel had always been fairly casual about his phone. He left it on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on his nightstand with the screen facing up. It was never a thing she thought about because there was never a reason to think about it. But sometime around the middle of that second week, she realized his phone was almost always face down now. On the dinner table, face down. On the arm of the sofa, face down. On the bathroom counter when he showered, which she could see when she went in after him, face down. She told herself the brightness probably bothered him. She had read somewhere that people do that to reduce the pull of notifications, to be more present. That was probably it. Daniel was always trying to be more intentional about things. That was just who he was. The second thing she noticed was that he had stopped laughing at the show they were watching together. This sounds small, and she knew it sounded small, and she felt a little ridiculous even registering it. But they had been watching a comedy they both genuinely enjoyed, a show they had been looking forward to finishing, and somewhere in those 2 weeks Daniel had stopped being present in the same way during those 45 minutes on the sofa. He was there physically. But he was somewhere else entirely, and the laugh that used to come out of him easily and without thinking, the one that made her smile even when the joke was not that funny to her, had just quietly gone away. She chalked it up to work. His company had been going through a restructuring and he had mentioned the stress of it a few times. That was the explanation, and it was a perfectly reasonable one, and she held on to it. The third thing was the hesitation. This one was harder to explain away. It was a Wednesday evening, about 16 days into the pattern, and they were cleaning up after dinner together, Sarah washing and Daniel drying, the easy domestic rhythm of a couple who had been doing this long enough that they did not need to narrate it. She had asked him, casually, without any particular weight behind the question, who he had been texting earlier while she was on the phone with her mother. And Daniel had paused. It was not a long pause. It was maybe 1.5 seconds, 2 at most. But she felt it the way you feel a single skip in a song you have heard 1,000 times. Your brain catches it before you can name it. And then he had said, completely evenly, that it was just a group chat from work, someone sharing memes, nothing interesting. He had even smiled a little when he said it. But the pause had happened, and Sarah had felt it, and she filed it away in the part of her mind that she was trying very hard not to visit too often. She did not say anything to Daniel about any of this. She was not ready for that conversation, and more than that, she was not sure she had anything real enough to build a conversation out of. A face-down phone and a distracted laugh and a 1-second pause were not evidence of anything except a tired husband in a stressful season at work. She knew that. She repeated it to herself several times a day like a quiet reassurance. And then came the night she heard him laugh. It was a Friday. She remembered that specifically because she had worked a long shift and come home more tired than usual and gone to bed before Daniel, which she almost never did. She had fallen asleep quickly and slept hard for about 2 hours, and then she had surfaced into that shallow, restless kind of half-sleep where you are aware of your surroundings without being fully awake. The bed was still empty beside her. She could hear the bathroom fan running down the hall. That had become normal enough that it did not fully wake her. But then, through the fan and through the closed door, she heard something that pulled her all the way back to the surface. Daniel was laughing. Not loudly. It was a low, quiet, private kind of laugh, the kind that happens when something genuinely catches you off guard and the delight of it is real and unperformed. She had not heard that laugh from him in months. Maybe longer. And hearing it come from behind a locked bathroom door at 1 a.m, while she lay alone in their bed, was one of the loneliest things she had ever experienced without being able to explain exactly why. She lay completely still and listened. The laugh faded. The fan kept running. A few minutes later she heard the bathroom door open, heard his footsteps in the hall, and then felt the careful, considerate way he eased himself back into bed so as not to wake her. He was always thoughtful like that. She kept her breathing slow and even. She did not let him know she was awake. She stared at the ceiling in the dark for a very long time after that, the house wrapped in that specific silence again, the one that sat on your chest, and she thought about that laugh, and she knew, with the quiet certainty of someone who had been paying attention for weeks, that she could not keep filing things away and explaining them with work stress and screen brightness. Something was happening. She did not know what it was yet. But she knew, the way you sometimes just know things, that she was about to find out. The next morning, over coffee, she brought it up. She kept her voice light, almost offhand, the way she had learned to approach difficult conversations with frightened patience. You lower the temperature first, you do not lead with the alarm. She told Daniel she had noticed he had been spending a lot of time on his phone at night lately and she just wanted to check in, make sure everything was okay. And Daniel had looked at her over the rim of his mug with an expression that was so calm, so completely untroubled, that for a moment she almost felt embarrassed for asking. He told her it was a colleague. A guy from his office named Brett who was going through a really rough divorce, the kind with lawyers and custody disputes and late-night spirals where he just needed someone to talk him down. Daniel said Brett did not have a lot of people and he felt like he could not just ignore the guy when he reached out. He said he had been taking the phone to the bathroom so the notifications would not wake Sarah up. He said he was sorry if it had seemed weird, he should have just told her. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers and said it was nothing, and that he was sorry, and that Brett was hopefully getting better. It was a good answer. It was a warm, specific, considerate answer that sounded exactly like something the Daniel she knew would do and say. And she believed him. She wanted to believe him, and the answer made believing him easy, and so she did. That same afternoon she called Maya and told her everything. The bathroom, the phone, the laugh, all of it. She needed to say it out loud to someone who knew both of them and could help her hear how it sounded. Maya listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which was not entirely like Maya, who was usually quick with her reactions. When Sarah finished, Maya told her she was being too hard on herself. She said it sounded like Daniel was telling the truth and that honestly, it sounded exactly like something Daniel would do, taking care of some sad colleague at midnight because that was just the kind of person he was. She said Sarah knew Daniel, and that she should trust what she knew. Sarah exhaled for what felt like the first time in 2 weeks. Maya was right. She knew Daniel. She was going to let it go. She would have let it go entirely, except for one small thing she did not notice until later that evening when she was looking back through her phone. She had called Maya at 2:14 in the afternoon. The call had lasted 6 minutes and 40 seconds. But Maya's first text response, the one where she said it sounded like Daniel was telling the truth, had come in at 2:16. 2 minutes into a 6-minute call. Before Sarah had even finished telling her the story, she told herself it did not mean anything. Maya was a fast reader, a fast thinker, a fast everything. She probably just skimmed the situation quickly and formed an opinion the way she always did, confidently and immediately, because that was Maya's whole personality. Sarah closed the phone log and put her phone in her bag and went about her evening and genuinely, truly tried to let the whole thing settle into the past where it belonged. She had confronted Daniel. He had given her an explanation. Maya had confirmed what she already wanted to believe. The case was closed. She was going to move forward. For 11 days, she almost managed it, then it started again. Not the bathroom, exactly, though that continued as well. It was other things now, newer things, things that did not fit inside the framework of a colleague going through a divorce. On a Saturday morning, Daniel offered to go pick up groceries, which was not unusual, except that he was gone for an hour and 40 minutes and came back with one bag. She checked the receipt, not to be suspicious, just out of habit, and the timestamp on it was 40 minutes after he had left. She did not ask where he had been for the other hour. She did not know how to ask it without it becoming something. On a Sunday afternoon, she walked past the living room and saw him standing near the window with his back to the room, phone to his ear, speaking in a voice too low to make out words. When she walked in, he turned around immediately and said he was just finishing up a call with his brother. She said okay. His brother lived in Portland. They talked maybe 4 times a year. She knew that. She said okay anyway. And then one evening she was in the kitchen and Daniel was in the car. He had gone out to grab something from the glove compartment and had been out there for 25 minutes. She watched from the kitchen window. He was just sitting in the parked car in their own driveway, phone in hand, completely still except for his thumbs. She stood at the window for a moment and then turned away because she did not want to be the person standing at the kitchen window watching her husband sit in the driveway, and also because she was afraid of what her face might do if he looked up and saw her there. That night she could not sleep at all. She lay in the dark and ran through every explanation she had given herself over the past several weeks and felt each of them go thin and transparent when she held them up to the light. The screen brightness. The work stress. The colleague named Brett. They had all made sense in the moment because she had needed them to make sense. But when she lined them up together and looked at them honestly, what she had was a month and a half of her husband disappearing into private spaces with his phone every single day, an explanation she could not verify, a best friend who had reassured her before she had even finished asking for reassurance, and a laugh she had heard through a locked door that had made her feel completely alone in her own marriage. She made an appointment with a private investigator the following morning. His name was Ron Teague. He operated out of a small office in a strip mall between a tax preparation service and a nail salon, and his website looked like it had not been updated since approximately 2011, but he had 46 Google reviews and 42 of them were 5 stars, which Sarah had decided was a more reliable indicator of competence than a well-designed website. She found him through a search at 11:30 at night, sitting in her car in the hospital parking lot during her break, because she had not wanted to do it on her home network and she was not entirely sure why, only that it felt important to keep this particular search separate from everything else. She called him the next morning and made an appointment for Thursday. She told him she thought her husband might be communicating with someone he was not supposed to be communicating with. She kept it clinical, the way she kept everything clinical when she needed to hold herself together. Ron Teague told her to come in and they would talk about her options. He had a flat, unhurried voice that she found oddly comforting. She sat across from him in a small office with 2 chairs and a desk and a framed photo of a yellow Labrador on the wall, and she told him everything from the beginning. Ron Teague took notes on a yellow legal pad and did not react to anything she said, which she also found comforting. When she finished, he put down his pen and told her that in his experience, the most efficient first step was not surveillance, which was expensive and time-consuming and often inconclusive. The most efficient first step was information she already had access to and simply had not used yet. He told her to check her home router log. He explained it to her slowly and clearly, the way she explained medication schedules to parents in her clinic. Most home routers, he said, keep an activity log that tracks every device connected to the network, what applications those devices are running, and what times they are active. She did not need Daniel's phone. She did not need his password. She did not need to go through his pockets or install anything or do anything that felt, to her, like crossing a line she could not uncross. All she needed to do was open the router app on her own phone, which was connected to their home network and which she had every right to access, and look at the activity log for Daniel's device during the hours when he was in the bathroom. She asked Ron Teague what she was looking for specifically. He told her the name of the application would show up in the log. She would not be able to read any messages. She would not be able to see who he was talking to. But she would be able to see exactly what app was open and for exactly how long, and that, he said, was usually enough to tell a person whether they were dealing with a problem or a misunderstanding. She went home that night and waited. She made dinner and ate with Daniel, and they watched an episode of the show, and she laughed at the right moments and asked him about his day and listened to the answer. She was very calm. She had always been good at being calm when it mattered. At 10:53, Daniel stood up, said he was going to use the bathroom, and took his phone with him. She heard the click of the lock. She waited 5 minutes. Then she picked up her phone, opened the router app, and navigated to the device log for Daniel's phone. The screen showed her a list of recent activity. She scrolled to the current session. His phone had been active since 10:54. She looked at the application column. WhatsApp. She put her phone down on the sofa cushion beside her and sat very still for a moment. The television was still on. Some host on a late-night show was saying something that the studio audience found very funny. She stared at the screen without seeing it. Then she picked up her phone again, opened the camera, and took a screenshot of the router log. Her hands were not shaking yet. That came later. She went back to Ron Teague 2 days later with the screenshot and 3 more just like it, one from each of the following nights, because she had checked every night and every night it was the same. 10:40 something. WhatsApp. 30 to 40 minutes. Every single time. Ron Teague looked at the screenshots without any particular expression and told her that this was useful and that he could take it from here. He explained that through legal and publicly available means, specifically cross-referencing account information and profile data that WhatsApp users often leave partially public, he could attempt to identify the account Daniel was communicating with most frequently during those windows. He said he would need 2 weeks and that his fee for this level of investigation was $600. She wrote him a check before she stood up from the chair. She did not tell anyone what she was doing. Not her sister, not her coworkers, not Maya. Especially not Maya, though she could not have articulated exactly why she felt that way. There was nothing concrete pointing at Maya. There was only that text message that had come in at the 2-minute mark of a 6-minute call, a thing so small that she was almost embarrassed to still be thinking about it. She was not thinking about it because it meant something. She was not thinking about it because of anything rational at all. She was thinking about it because it was there, lodged in the back of her mind like a splinter too small to see but impossible to stop feeling. She went to work. She took care of her patients. She came home and made dinner and sat on the sofa and watched television with her husband and took screenshots of the router log after he went to the bathroom. She lived her normal life with the careful steadiness she had always been known for, and underneath it, in a place she kept very quiet and very contained, she waited. Ron Teague called her on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 13 days after she had written him the check, and told her he had something and asked if she could come in. She was on her lunch break. She told him she would be there in 20 minutes. She sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for a moment before she started the engine, and she thought about the fact that in 20 minutes she was either going to find out that she had put her husband and her marriage through a month of private suspicion for absolutely no reason, or she was going to find out something that she could not unfind. She thought about which one she was hoping for. Then she started the car. She drove to the strip mall. She parked between the tax place and the nail salon. She walked into the small office with the 2 chairs and the desk and the yellow Labrador on the wall. Ron Teague was already sitting down. He had a single printed page on the desk in front of him, face down. He waited for her to sit. Then he turned it over and slid it across the desk toward her. She looked at the page. She read the name on it. And then she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a very long time without saying anything at all. The account belonged to Maya. There is a specific kind of pain that does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive the way you expect pain to arrive, with a sharp intake of breath or immediate tears or the sudden collapse of something inside you. Sometimes it comes in quietly, almost politely, and sits down next to you, and you just look at it for a while without either of you saying anything. That was what happened to Sarah in that small office with the yellow Labrador on the wall. She looked at the name on the page. She looked at it for a long time. And then she folded the paper in half, put it in her bag, thanked Ron Teague in a completely even voice, and walked back out to her car. She sat in the parking lot for 47 minutes. She knew it was 47 minutes because she watched the clock on her dashboard the entire time, not because she was tracking it but because she needed something concrete and unchanging to look at while everything else rearranged itself. The tax preparation place next door had a handwritten sign in the window advertising early filing discounts. She read it probably 30 times. A woman came out of the nail salon with her hands held carefully away from her body, fingers spread, waiting for the polish to dry. Sarah watched her get into a car and drive away and thought, with a strange and total clarity, that she would give almost anything right now to be that woman, going wherever she was going, with nothing heavier on her mind than keeping her nails intact. Maya. The name sat in the center of every thought she tried to have and would not move. She went back through everything now, not with suspicion, but with the terrible, clarifying lens of confirmation. She thought about how Maya had responded to her phone call at the 2-minute mark. She thought about how quickly and how warmly and how specifically Maya had reassured her, not in the vague way a friend reassures you when they are simply trying to make you feel better, but in the precise way someone reassures you when they know exactly what you are worried about because they are the reason you are worried about it. She thought about the last time she and Maya had all three been together in the same room, a dinner at Sarah and Daniel's house about 6 weeks ago, and she replayed it now with different eyes. The way Maya had laughed at something Daniel said. The easy familiarity of it. She had always read that ease as the comfortable dynamic of two people who both loved the same person and had built a genuine friendship around that shared love. She did not know what she read it as now. She was not sure she was ready to read it as anything yet. She drove home. Daniel was still at work. She walked through the house slowly, not looking for anything specific, just being in the space, feeling how it fit around her now that she knew what she knew. The wedding photo on the hallway wall. Maya in the frame, standing next to Sarah, laughing at something just off camera. The coffee maker on the counter, already prepped for tomorrow morning because Daniel always did that the night before. 6 years of a life built carefully and quietly by two people who were supposed to be in it together. She stood in the kitchen for a long time and then she sat down at the table and she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily and privately, the way she did most things. By the time she heard Daniel's car in the driveway she had washed her face and made tea and was sitting at the kitchen table looking at nothing in particular. Daniel came in, set down his bag, and said her name with a slight question in it because he could see immediately that something was wrong. She had always been easy to read for him. That had always been one of the things she liked about their marriage, that he paid enough attention to notice. She looked at him across the kitchen and thought about the 23 days she had spent taking screenshots of router logs and writing checks to private investigators and lying awake at 2 in the morning trying to give his behavior the most generous interpretation she could manage. And then she reached into her bag and put Ron Teague's printed page on the table between them. Daniel looked at it. He went very still. Then he sat down. What came next was not the conversation she had been rehearsing in her head for 47 minutes in a strip mall parking lot. She had prepared herself for denial, for anger, for the defensive machinery that people reach for when they are caught. What she got instead was something she had not prepared for at all. Daniel put his elbows on the table and put his face in his hands and after a moment he said, very quietly, that he needed to tell her something and that he needed her to listen to all of it before she said anything. She said nothing. She waited. He told her he had been talking to Maya every night for the past 6 weeks. He told her it was on WhatsApp. He told her it was always late at night because that was the only window of time when he could be sure Sarah was asleep and would not accidentally see a notification or a message preview. He told her he had been hiding in the bathroom because it was the only room in the house with a lock, and he needed to be absolutely sure she would not walk in on a conversation that was not meant for her to see yet. He told her he was sorry for the secrecy and that he understood completely why it had looked the way it had looked and that if he had been in her position he would have felt exactly the same way she was clearly feeling right now. Sarah watched his face while he said all of this. She had spent 6 years learning the specific geography of that face, the way it moved when he was being honest, the way it moved when he was being careful, the way it moved when he was genuinely distressed about something. What she saw right now was all three of those things at once, and despite everything, despite the paper on the table between them, she could not locate the thing she had been steeling herself to find, which was guilt. Not the guilt of a man who had been caught doing something unforgivable. Something else. Something that looked, almost against her will, like the distress of a man who had badly miscalculated something he had meant to go entirely differently. Then he told her why. In early August, about 2 months before any of this had started, Sarah and Daniel had been driving back from visiting his parents, and Sarah had fallen asleep in the passenger seat somewhere around the 3rd hour of the drive. She had been deeply asleep, the kind where you are completely unguarded, and at some point she had started talking. Not full sentences, just fragments, the loose spillage of a dreaming mind. Daniel had kept driving and listened without waking her, the way you do when someone you love is being unexpectedly transparent. And in those few minutes of half-conscious murmuring, Sarah had said something about Greece. She had talked about it in college with Maya, apparently. This trip they were going to take someday, the two of them, to a specific group of islands, a very particular route they had mapped out in a notebook during a study hall their junior year. It was one of those plans that gets made with the complete sincerity of 20-year-olds and then slowly buried under the accumulating weight of real life, jobs and weddings and mortgages and all the things that turn someday into never without you quite noticing. Sarah had never mentioned it to Daniel directly. Not once in 6 years. But in the car that afternoon, asleep, she had talked about the light on the water and the specific color the sky goes at a certain time of evening over the Aegean, and Daniel had listened to the whole thing and then driven the rest of the way home in silence, thinking. Their 10th wedding anniversary was 4 months away. He had been trying to figure out what to do for it, something that would mean something real, not just a nice dinner or a weekend trip that could have been for anyone. He had not known about the Greece plan, about the notebook, about any of it. But he knew Maya would. Maya had been there for all of it, for the study hall and the notebook and the whole 20-year accumulation of Sarah's private wishes and half-forgotten dreams. So he had reached out to Maya and told her what he had heard in the car, and Maya, without a moment's hesitation, had told him to call her that night because she had a lot to tell him. And so for 6 weeks they had been doing exactly that, every night in the 40-minute window after Sarah fell asleep, building an anniversary trip to Greece that was not just a trip but a reconstruction, island by island, of a plan that Sarah had made at 20 years old with her best friend and had never stopped quietly wanting, even after she had stopped letting herself want it out loud. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and put his phone on the table. He opened WhatsApp and turned the phone so Sarah could see it. The screen showed a conversation thread with Maya's name at the top. It was full of screenshots of islands and ferry timetables and the name of a hotel on Santorini with a handwritten note in Maya's unmistakable capital letters that said, "This is the one, trust me." There were links to a notebook supplier in Athens because Maya had found the specific brand from their college study hall and wanted to get Sarah a new one. There were arguments about whether to fly into Athens first or go directly to Mykonos, long enthusiastic messages from Maya written entirely in capital letters and covered in details that only someone who had known Sarah for 15 years could possibly know. Sarah sat at the kitchen table and looked at the phone for a very long time. The trip was real. The love behind it was real. She could see that immediately and completely and without any doubt at all. She looked at the ferry timetables and the hotel with Maya's note and she felt something enormous and complicated move through her that she could not name exactly, some combination of relief and grief and love and something else she needed more time to identify. But then Daniel said there was something else. And his voice, when he said it, had shifted slightly, into something quieter and more careful. He said that when he had talked to Maya earlier that day, after Sarah had gone to work, Maya had called him. Not to discuss the trip. To tell him that she needed to tell Sarah something herself, and soon, and that she thought he should know before she did. Sarah looked up from the phone. Daniel said he did not know all of it. He said Maya had not told him everything, only that there was something she had been carrying for a long time that she felt Sarah deserved to know, and that planning this trip together had made it impossible for her to keep carrying it. He said he did not know what it was specifically. He said he thought Sarah needed to call Maya. Sarah sat at the table. The tea had gone cold. The wedding photo was on the wall in the hallway and Maya was in it, laughing at something just off camera, and Sarah looked at her husband across the table and thought about the Greece trip and the ferry timetables and the hotel with the handwritten note, and she picked up her phone. Maya answered on the second ring. She always answered quickly. That was one of the 10,000 small things Sarah knew about her after 15 years, the same way she knew that Maya took her coffee with oat milk and kept her phone on full volume and cried at commercials but never at actual sad movies. She knew Maya the way you only know someone after you have shared enough ordinary time with them that the extraordinary moments have somewhere to land. And right now, hearing Maya pick up after 1.5 rings, Sarah felt the full weight of all that accumulated knowing pressed down on her at once. She told Maya she had found out about the trip. She said it quietly and without accusation because by the time she dialed the number she had already decided that whatever came next, she was not going to approach it the way fear had been whispering at her to approach it for the past 6 weeks. She was going to approach it the way she approached everything that mattered, steadily and with her eyes open. There was a long pause on Maya's end. Not the pause of someone calculating, but the pause of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a while and was now that it had arrived not entirely sure how to step into it. Maya said yes. She said she knew about the trip. She said she was sorry for the secrecy and that she knew it must have been awful for Sarah, that if their positions had been reversed she would have been losing her mind. She said Daniel was the one who had reached out and that she had said yes immediately because the idea of doing something like that for Sarah, of giving her that particular thing back, had felt like the most right thing she had been asked to do in years. She said the planning had been genuinely wonderful and that she thought Sarah was going to love every single piece of it. And then she went quiet again. A different kind of quiet this time. The kind that has something sitting inside it. Sarah waited. She was good at waiting. Maya said she needed to tell her something. She said she had been trying to figure out how to say it for a long time, and that she had started several conversations in her head that had all ended badly before they even got going, and that planning this trip with Daniel had made it impossible to keep sitting on it because every night she spent on the phone building something for Sarah out of love had also been a night she spent aware of the things she was not saying, and carrying both of those things at the same time had become too heavy. She said she wanted Sarah to know that nothing had ever happened. She needed to say that first and she needed Sarah to believe it because it was the complete truth. Nothing had ever happened, not one single moment, not even close. But Maya said that for a period of time, she had felt something for Daniel that she had not asked to feel and had not wanted to feel and had spent a considerable amount of energy trying to unfeel. She said it had started around the time of Sarah and Daniel's 3rd anniversary, so about 3 years ago, and that it had arrived the way these things sometimes arrive without warning or logic and had taken her completely off guard. She said she had never said a word about it to anyone. She had never acted on it in any way. She had never allowed herself to be alone with Daniel in a situation that could become anything, had never sent a message she would not have shown Sarah, had never done anything except carry it privately and keep showing up for Sarah the way Sarah deserved to be shown up for, and wait for the feeling to go away. She said it had mostly gone away. That was not nothing, she said. It had faded over time in the way feelings do when you refuse to feed them. But mostly was not the same as entirely, and she could not in good conscience stand in Sarah's life at this level of closeness, planning a trip like this, calling herself Sarah's best friend, without Sarah knowing the truth of what Maya had been carrying. She said Sarah deserved to decide, with full information, what she wanted their friendship to be. That was the only reason she was saying any of this. Not to unburden herself at Sarah's expense. But because Sarah had always given her honesty and she owed Sarah the same. Then Maya stopped talking. The line was quiet. Sarah could hear her breathing. Sarah sat with it. She sat with all of it, the trip and the router screenshots and the 47 minutes in the parking lot and Daniel's face across the kitchen table, and now this, Maya's voice on the phone saying the thing that Sarah's gut had been circling for weeks without being able to name it. She thought about what Ron Teague had said, that the router log would tell her whether she was dealing with a problem or a misunderstanding. She thought about how she had driven to that strip mall braced for one kind of answer and had come out with something that was neither of the options she had prepared herself for. Not innocent. Not guilty. Something more human and more complicated than either of those words had room for. She had not been wrong to be suspicious. She had been wrong about what she was suspicious of. Her instincts had been picking up a real frequency, something genuinely hidden, a real warmth moving between her husband and her best friend in the dark of late nights when she was asleep. She had just been wrong about what that warmth was made of. It was made of a trip to Greece and ferry timetables and a hotel on Santorini and a 15-year-old notebook and a feeling that Maya had chosen, every single day for 3 years, not to act on. That was what had been hiding in her bathroom. That was what had been making her husband laugh softly behind a locked door at 1 a.m. She asked Maya one question. She asked her if she still felt it now, at this moment, talking to her on the phone. Maya did not hesitate. She said no. She said what she felt now, what she had felt every day of planning this trip, was uncomplicated love for her best friend and a very strong opinion about which hotel on Santorini had the best view, and that she stood behind both of those things completely. Sarah laughed. It came out before she could stop it, sudden and genuine and a little wet around the edges because she had been holding a lot in her chest for a very long time, and laughter turned out to be how some of it decided to leave. Maya laughed too, a careful laugh, still not sure of her footing, still waiting to find out where the ground was. And Sarah let her wait for just another moment, because she was still finding her own footing too, still feeling out the shape of this new version of things, what it required of her and what she was willing to give it. What she decided, sitting at that kitchen table with the cold tea and the wedding photo in the hallway and Daniel across from her watching her face with the careful attention of a man who understood he had made a serious miscalculation in the service of a genuinely loving intention, was that she was not going to make a final decision about any of it that night. Not about Maya, not about the friendship, not about what this changed or what it did not change. She had spent 6 weeks making decisions under conditions of incomplete information, and she was not going to do that anymore. She had all the information now. She was going to sit with it and let it settle and figure out what she actually felt when the shock of it had time to become something quieter. She told Maya she had hurt her. She told her she was grateful for the honesty, that she knew it was not easy to say, and that she needed some time. Maya said of course. She said to take whatever time she needed. She said she loved her. Sarah said she knew. Then she hung up. She and Daniel sat at the kitchen table for a long time without speaking. He had heard enough of her side of the conversation to understand the shape of what had been said, and he had the good sense not to fill the silence with words it did not need. He just sat with her, the way he had always been good at sitting with her, quietly and without agenda, the same way he made her coffee every morning without being asked, not as a performance of love but simply as the steady daily fact of it. Eventually Daniel asked her if she still wanted to go to Greece. He said it softly, almost tentatively, like a man who understood that the question was about much more than a trip. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the light on the water that she had described in her sleep, the color the sky goes over the Aegean at a certain time of evening, the notebook she had shared with Maya in a college study hall before she had any idea what her life was going to look like. She thought about the person who had listened to her say all of that in a car while she was unconscious and had spent 6 weeks trying to give it back to her. She said yes. They did go to Greece. 7 months later, for their 10th anniversary, they flew into Athens and took a ferry to Mykonos and then to Santorini and stayed at the hotel Maya had written about in capital letters with the note that said "Trust me." The view was everything Maya had promised it would be. As for Maya, she did not come with them. She and Sarah spent several months in a different kind of conversation, slower and more careful than the ones they had been having for 15 years, rebuilding something on a foundation that was more honest than the one it had been standing on before. It was harder than their friendship had ever been. It was also, in some ways, more real. Whether it ever returned to what it had been, that particular ease and closeness that comes from 15 years of accumulated ordinary time, is something only the two of them know. What Sarah said, when someone asked her about it much later, was that she had gone looking for a betrayal and found something more complicated. She had found a husband who hid in the bathroom for a month because he was trying to give her back a dream she had let go of, and a best friend who had told her the truth when she did not have to, and an instinct that had been right about something real even when it was wrong about what that something was. She said she did not know what to do with all of that at first. She said it took a long time to find the right place to put it. But she said the coffee was still on the counter every morning when she came downstairs. And for now, she said, that was enough.